Hello, and welcome to our panel, Play as a Commons, from Practical Utopias to Peer-to-Peer Futures. My name is Daphne Dragona, and I have co-curated this year's conference program along with Christopher Gansing, the artistic director. I would like to very briefly say a couple of words about our conference, as this is our first K1 panel. So following this year's theme, the conference aims to discuss the capture-all logic and to locate the processes, technologies, and infrastructures of the new system of organization, which is based on the datafication, quantification, and correlation of everything. The conference is structured around three main streams, those of work, life, and play, wishing to look into how each of these areas is transformed, and at the same time, how the three of them together constitute inseparable components of an accelerated capitalism. Today's gameful work, commodified life, and factional play are thus in the core of our discussion as an attempt to outline the shaping of today's algorithmic society, highlighting how we live, work, and act within it. So it's no longer only about the networks, the governments, but also about we ourselves as users or inhabitants act as sensors and contributors in a system that captures everything, allowing our behaviors to be recognized, patterned, predicted, and optimized. Question is there really any way to avoid the system of organization which is enabled by the new algorithms of control? Or are we doomed to new forms of identification, regulation, and normalization? These profound asymmetries, as well as the urge for change, and resistance and the potentiality of access have been central for the development of our conference program, which, as every year, hosts panels of different focus and scale in the auditorium, the theater saal, the cafe stage, and the K1. For the K1 panels, this year we try a new format, which particularly aims to explore how artistic practices respond to the questions and the dilemmas of the capture-all logic. So for every panel of this cluster of panels, we address a different direction and approach, and we invite two artists and a curator, art historian, or theorist to be with us. Our aim is to build an in-depth conversation about this topic. And for this reason, we invite also two guest and festival participants to be with us as respondents to the panel. So for this first K1 panel, Play as a Commons from Practical Utopias to Peer-to-Peer Futures, we, of course, address play and the role of play in today's algorithmic society. Within this stream, we will look into issues like the gamification and the quantified self, but we particularly also want to highlight the potentiality of play. And for our panel today, I believe that it greatly relates to the abundance and the sociability of play and how it can relate to the logic of the commons and to peer-to-peer practices in order to possibly form constructive responses to the capture-all logic. So I should talk no more. I would like to introduce Mark Butler, who we are very happy to have as a moderator with us. Mark is a writer, academic, and curator. He's a research associate at the Institute for Art and Media of the University of Potsdam and coordinator of its digital games research centers. The focus of his research are game cultures and digital media, and he has published a great number of papers and books on these topics. The most recent is his Das Bild mich sich, where he discusses the popular techniques of the self at the beginning of the 21st century. He recently co-curated the exhibition Svindel der Wirklichkeit, sorry, my German is not so good, at the Academy of Arts in Berlin. Mark, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Daphne, and thank you very much for coming here. It's my pleasure to moderate the panel. The title is up on the screen. I'll repeat again: Play as a Commons, Practical Utopias, and P2P Futures. I'm going to give a brief introduction of my thoughts on this title before I then introduce our first speaker. Play belongs to the commons, I think, if anything ever did, because it's not only a fundamental cultural resource, but also a natural one that everyone has access to. Play theorists talk about play being around for 250 million years. Almost all animals play. all humans, play. It's not only a central source of individual development, but also of collective identity. And, whereas, coming from the theme of the conference, Capture All, it can't be overlooked that we are living in a time in which, there are different attempts to capitalize on play, to make it operationable and to gain profit out of it. This isn't the whole story, right? I mean, in general, yes, the importance of play is on the rise, and different agents and institutions are trying to mobilize the potentials and potencies of play for different agendas. And we'll be hearing about this throughout the conference. There are attempts being made to privatize the time people spend playing through myriad proprietary products and services. These attempts, I would argue, are in the end futile, because the playful spirit, that which they are attempting to commodify and capitalize on, is in its essence that which cannot be put into bondage, cannot be put into service. Rather, it is the embodiment of transgressive pleasure. And I think, when we go to the concrete examples that we'll hear about today, we will see, that the richness of what play offers, and this richness is something that is not being capitalized on, cannot be capitalized on, because it really works in different dimensions. By focusing on practical utopias, a characterization that fits quite well to the space of alterity that play offers, we will be looking at the power of play to open up a space for reimagining the world. Whereas a utopia is generally thought of as a non-existing space, utopos, a practical utopia points to the fact that utopias don't have to be castles in the sky, but rather can be very down-to-earth attempts of reimagining the world we live in. A practical utopia offers an alternative space to the one we occupy in most of our everyday lives. The projects that will be presented to us in the following are spaces that we can enter and experience, thereby opening up a horizon of possibilities for reflecting, critiquing, and reimagining the world we live in. The idea of P2P networking and interactions already has a rich past, and today we also want to talk about what promise it holds for the future in a world that is dominated by the tendency of the existing power structures to capture and dominate all. I don't want to forget that horizon, but it's important to remember that's not everything that's going on here. The working hypothesis being, for this panel, that the shared experience of playing together has great potential to generate social ties and empower shared visions and P2P practices for a future driven by the 99%. That said, it is my pleasure to introduce Ruth Catlow, an artist and curator who is based in Southend, England, and whose work is shown internationally. She is the co-founder and co-director of Furtherfield, a gallery and lab, as well as an online community and network for arts, technology, and social change that began in 1997. The public exhibition and lab venues in the heart of London provide a unique physical interface for free exhibitions, events, and workshops, and the attached online hub provides a forum for exchange and critical review. These spaces bring together diverse local cultures with thriving networks of international artists, technologists, and activists, from which commissions and exhibitions are developed that tour nationally and internationally to strengthen the expressive and democratic potential of digital cultures. Ruth's artwork has been featured on the DV blog, the Resume Art Base, and the Digital Kitchen. You can find stuff online. And projects that she's worked on have titles like Rethinking War Games, the Festival of Money, which I'm very curious about, Do It With Others, which we'll be hearing more about today, and one of my personal favorites, We Won't Fly for Art. She has worked curatorially, and I just want to mention one of those works. She put together the Collaboration and Freedom, the World of Free and Open Source Art, which is also an online resource that we can access. And you have published articles on drawing as a collective activity, No Ecology Without Social Ecology, and has co-edited a book on artists rethinking games. So I think you are an expert for talking about the subjects that I've just traced out. Today, she will give us an in-depth look at Play Your Place, an open artwork and online game-building game that she has developed with Dr. Mary Flanagan from Tilt Factor. They've been working on this project since 2012 within Furtherfield's Do It With Others framework. And that said, I'm at the end of my introduction. I'll give you the microphone and let you tell us more about your work.
Thank you. And just listening to all of that, no wonder I'm feeling tired. You know, there's a lot of work going on. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Play Your Place. So this is a project that I've been developing with Mary Flanagan, and it's developed as a kind of partnership between Furtherfield and Tilt Factor. So, as Mark described, Play Your Place is an open artwork. It's an online game-building game created by artists, programmers, and imaginative citizens to develop a collective vision for a richer, emancipated life for all beings in all places. And yes, we're not afraid to use a bit of polemic and rhetoric to get people kind of stirred up and involved. And through this project, we've been exploring the whole set of things that are set up in this panel. So really looking at how social play can empower shared visions, the development of shared visions, and peer-to-peer practices for a citizen-driven future. So, I'd just like to open with a few thoughts just generally about the commons. So I think mainstream discussions of the commons often unhelpfully centre around how to manage and share scarce resources. So materials, knowledge, and praxis even get stuck on questions of ownership and fairness. But for us, the more important aspects of the commons is about how together we can imagine, devise, maintain and steward our shared places and infrastructures. So it's really about involving people in imagining and creating the world that we want, rather than thinking about things as a kind of limited set of things that we then have to share out evenly. And it's this business of really creating the conditions in which more of us feel like the creation of a good life is the business of us all, no matter who we are. Mark, you just gave a really thorough introduction to myself, to what we do at Furtherfield, so that's great. So which means I can now just show a few slides, but I won't go into it in detail. So yes, I co-founded Furtherfield with artist Mark Garrett. We're both artists, back in 1997. And we're now a gallery, a lab, and an online community for arts, technology, and social change. We got started in 1997, really, as the web was properly getting going as a place that anyone could publish to and start to create their own social spaces. And so Furtherfield is the creation of a community, and it is a community of artists, techies, and activists who've worked out both the kind of sets of platforms and the content that we want to share between us for a kind of international focus for critical review, discussion, and co-creation. Just so, I think it's good to have images in your head. This is our gallery in the middle of a North London park. And here we have a programme of exhibitions that look at the social effects of technology in the networked age. I'm not going to talk about that, but come and check us out online if you're interested in our programmes. And we also run workshops really for people at all levels, so total newbies, kids with their guardians, down to people running crypto parties, and we've had a long-running reading group for the Commons based at the Furtherfield Commons. I show this slide. So DIWO has been an ongoing programme at Furtherfield, and this slide continues to be really useful. It was a graphic that we produced when we launched an email art happening that took place over a month in the inbox of all subscribers to the Net Behaviour discussion list. And the reason this graphic is useful is because it represents the way in which networks, or it helps to crystallise for me the way in which networks changed what it meant to be an artist for me forever. We are now always in networks of a whole set of different categories of things, so tools, groupings, crafts. we have the philosopher who I always think of as Namjoon Pike, so, and the hysteric down the bottom here, and the talking dildo, which gives due respect to the role that porn has made in the kind of growth of the internet. And so it's about life in the net or on the net. It's also about how collaboration has become central to artistic production and networks. So moving us on from the DIY ethos where we make our own, we grab the tools, we make our own tools to make our own world. This is acknowledging that we now do it together. This is something that we do together, and it creates a whole kind of explosion of possibility. So, brief introduction to Furtherfield, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Play Your Place. So I'm going to give a description of exactly what it is, then some examples and stories of what have happened around the project, and then some comments again, coming back to thinking about how social play can kind of empower shared visions and peer-to-peer practices. So it's an online artwork, an online multi-level platform game for people to draw, make and play games that express their shared values and explore their aspirations for the future of their locality. Okay, so this was the intention. Why did we get started? So this is me and Dr. Murray Flanagan back in 2012 in Southend-on-Sea, which is an estuary town about 50 miles east of London, a real kind of seaside town. And Mary was presenting her work at Metal, a very wonderful art centre based in Southend, which somehow manages to bring international artists into the seaside town and then gather the local councillors, the regeneration agencies, local people from very many different backgrounds to have these kind of quite heated debates. Or this is what happened that day. And her panel, her presentation of her work sparked a row, basically, between the planners and the councillors and the people who were unhappy with the planning processes in the area. And I was on the panel, Mary was there, and we had a gobby moment together, and we said, oh, well, what you need, all you need is to kind of pay attention to what's going on in open source software development, where you just open up these processes. People were irritated by the fact that they were being asked for their opinion, but the only way they could give their opinion was in carefully framed documents, maybe 10-page questionnaires where the questions were so framed that you could only give them the answers that they wanted, this kind of thing. So we suggested that by combining a kind of open source principles of free and open source software, participatory art and play that you would be able to engage more people. And we said that it could be done, and they said, okay, go on, show us how it's done. So out of this debate grew Play Your Place. And now Play Your Place brings together two world-forming activities that appeal particularly to the wilder among us and who don't think that the world should be planned by people who like filling out tick box forms. And so these two world-forming activities are drawing and gaming. So we started in the local area saying, come on, draw the change you want to see, and we promised that if they drew it, it would happen. So what happened? So we had this dual process running alongside, so public programs of public engagement where we were asking people about how they would like their town to be different. And we tried many different formats for public engagement. And here are some of them. So this is the kind of traditional beach, the beach cutout where you stick your head through. And it was a way to kind of document the conversations that were happening between people about what was important to them. And running alongside the public engagement were conversations and tests and activities around game design. And we settled quite early on the platform game as a really good format for having people think about action and consequence. It's also, so in a platform game, I'm going to describe it just in case there's someone who doesn't know what it is. Super Mario Brothers, early Super Mario Brothers, you run along, you're grabbing rewards, you're avoiding obstacles, avoiding enemies, you're aiming for a goal, and you get rewarded if you get there. So it's beautifully moralistic as well. You get punished for bad behaviour, rewarded for good behaviour, and people like that. It's we respond well to that. We understand that as a kind of formula. So we had people starting to design the elements of the platform game. So they're missions, avatars, setting, obstacles, and rewards. And these are nice. So these drawings came out of public events. So Alex would like to see more equal access to primary school. David would like to stop them making the wrong people redundant. I particularly like David's because the them is so kind of boldly claimed, them to stop making the wrong people redundant. He doesn't say who they are, but he believes that we all know who they are. So, out of this process, we worked with Soda, who produce playful learning software, and we developed a free browser-based game that anyone can go online, they can upload their drawings, and they can build the games with others and then play. People decide what's important, they draw the elements, and then they build the game. So they can upload drawings as backgrounds, obstacles, and rewards, and then edit the elements in the game to create the game story. So we have an interface that we've built. It's built in HTML5. It's published on GitHub. And so we were developing the software as we were doing the public events and having people play with the software, tell us what worked about it. It was pretty hellish, and I don't advise anyone to do it because you end up with people getting very distracted by the fact that software isn't doing the thing that you want it to do. But nevertheless, there were some gains from that process. Okay, so this is, now I'm just going to talk through. So we developed it in Southend, we ran it, and now I'm going to talk through the fact that we've run it in a number of different places, in a number of different contexts, and just to give you some examples of the games that have been made and the kinds of things that people have thought about and the way they've kind of communicated that in their games. So this was my favourite. I'm allowed to have favourites. My favourite game that was made by two young men in Southend who also have a band that's called the Tory Town Poets. And so this game is the work of the Tory Town Poets. It's very polemical, and the change they wanted to see in Southend was that people were less apathetic about the political situation. And I'm going to try and show you... okay. So this is one Stan Army, the eternal struggle of the proletariat masses against the oppressive bourgeois regime. I promise you I didn't write that, they did. And I'm just going to show you a little snippet of this. So this is a game they built within our system. So it's a video trailer for it. So Stan's lived an honourable life, and then his pension's cut, and he has to pay more taxes, and he can't get healthcare, and then he snaps. And Stan is crunched by all these, so he has to avoid the swamps and the... So they've created everything in this game other than the music, which we commissioned. Okay, so we'll... Oops. Okay, so we'll pause that one. So, you can rank each game level, you can vote for the change. So we've got all these ideas in all these different levels in which people can respond and rate the game quality. And each game can be shared, remixed, you can add your own drawings to it, you can work with other people's drawings. So it's really kind of embedding this idea that we make the world together, and that different people's drawings can come to make one world. we took this to South Westminster, so a very different area. It's a part of London by the Tate, so this was co-commissioned by the Tate and Peabody Housing Trust. And South Westminster, so Pimlico, is very, very, there are some very wealthy people living there, and there are some people with really very little opportunity, and people really living on the breadline there as well. And so we ran this set of events at a public fete, and 4 games came out of this. This, for those of you that aren't Londoners, maybe you won't recognise, this is Boris Johnson with an axe, the Mayor of London. And this drawing in the background was made by a fireman who was there at this village fete protesting the closure of the fire stations in London. And in this, the mission of the game is all the fire stations have closed, it's the big society, it's your job now to put out all the fires. London is on fire. This one, a really sweet game, and we discovered that a strong concern for people was who wouldn't necessarily identify themselves as particularly political, was caring for animals. So one of the games that came out of here, and this has drawings by at least 15 people in because it was that much of a big deal, was caring for stray dogs and cats in the local park. And in this game, you're the dog and you have to lick the people in order to win a loving home. And again, this is my favourite. So in this game, you have to move into the area, grab the cash, and kill the spirit of community. So I'm going to show you this one now. So you're taking out nurses, you're ousting the key workers, you're closing the nurseries in order to build yourself a mansion, basically. So you're buying up the property, pushing all these people out of the... Yeah, okay. Okay. Now, we also... Oh, hang on a minute. Would you mind just turning the sound down on that so that otherwise I'm going to get flustered trying to control the computer. Okay, so we've also run this game at the Alternative Art Fair in Copenhagen, where we invited people to play a future peer-to-peer coexistence. So we said there are no corporations and there is no government, what are you going to do? And we had a whole set of games around that. And more recently, we've worked with the South Bank Centre and the Web Foundation to have people think about the web we want. This was in the context of Tim Berners-Lee for a call for Magna Carta for the web. There are many game samples online, but rather than show you those, I'd rather just kind of wrap up with some final thoughts. Oh, and here's some images of the public events and the drawings that were made at South Bank Centre. So, to wrap up, these are my thoughts on how the project can be read in relation to the Commons. So, firstly, the importance of the free and open source software production. So, this was made by Soda. It uses HTML5 to enable accessible cross-platform in-browser creation and play without plugins. So it's this idea that really anyone can get at it, they can use it as long as they've got a computer and they can download a browser. The fact that it was created as free and open source software meant that we weren't locking the developers out of their own learning and software development, which meant that they invested a huge amount of imagination and energy into making something really wonderful. And they can now go on and do whatever they like with the software, and we can still come back to them and ask them to develop it. So it's this way of kind of keeping that process open, which is really fundamental to the ethos of the project. And in relation to gamification, this is this is the opposite of gamification. So it makes data gathering difficult, messy, but a kind of satisfying to create. So we're consciously creating the data. We're kind of really engaged in data production here. And consciously organising social relations via the backgrounds and obstacles and rewards and props, and then exploring the consequences through the game rules. And the questions of data and who it's by and who it's for. So what the planners said when we were first developing this project is that planners, they understand very often what people want to happen in their town, but they really struggle to make the justification for it. They have to argue for the spending of public money, and because who has the power to influence people's attitudes and to do this kind of information gathering? Well, usually large commercial concerns or government. And so it was like, so a kind of key motivation for this project was to actually have people think more about how they could start to produce the data that would then shape their towns. And this is, we're right at the early stages of this. We're really not there yet. And if we're being required to justify everything with data, our thought is that we really need to get hold of it ourselves and develop a philosophy of data commons and data union as distinct from the kind of open data hype. Okay.